All right. So welcome everyone to Shivali's Books Online. We are LA's oldest independent bookstore, established in 1940. Tonight we have a very intriguing event with the two authors of Ensemble, using the power of improv and play to forge connections in a lonely world. This book draws on combined expertise in improvisational theater and psychiatry, featuring author team Dan O'Connor and Dr. Jeff Katzman. In the book, they talk about how improv skills are the perfect antidote to loneliness and isolation. The authors with us tonight are, of course, Jeff Katzman, a professor of psychiatry at the University of New Mexico, and Dan O'Connor, actor, writer, and director. The two have created a process in the book called ensembling, which will help us build an ensemble of relationships in our lives and also learn how to more deeply enjoy the groups we already belong to. I'm going to go ahead and hand over the mic to these two gentlemen so they can talk a little bit more about that. Please give a very warm, albeit digital welcome to Dr. Jeff Katzman and Dan O'Connor. Please take it away.
Thank you, Teresa. Thanks very much. Hi, everybody. Thanks very much for coming. Jeff and I are going to talk about our origin story and how we came to write this book. We're also going to talk about what's in the book, and there'll be time, like Teresa said, there'll be time at the end for any Q&A. So if you have a question, we're happy to answer it. This is our second book. We wrote a book called Life Unscripted about 4 or 5 years ago. Jeff, do you want to tell our origin story?
Absolutely. So our our origin story has to do with me as a psychiatrist, wondering why I had actually gone into medicine and psychiatry, and not the happiest of souls. I went to Second City and saw a show. They had just moved to the West Coast to the Mayfair Theater in Santa Monica, and they said that they were starting a school and that you could audition for the school, and so I did, and I went, and I think there were a couple hundred people there, and I got a phone call that I made it, and I think all couple hundred people made it, and showed up and paid our check, but I had my first improv class and my first experience with Ensemble, and we went through the levels, level 1 and level 2, level 3, and then somebody brought a flyer that said, there's this thing at LA Theater Sports, you should come, you can come for the weekend. So my little group went and met with Dan, and we did a weekend workshop, and yeah, we had a really, really awesome time. And for me, that was the start of a really important friendship with Dan that's gone on for 30 years, and really, for me does talk about how important our friendships and relationships are in our life. And Dan and I have known each other, been out of contact for 5 or 6 years, then found contact again. And I think that's part of what we're talking about here.
So one of the things that was really inspiring when Jeff and I came back to knowing each other, because we were out of touch for a while, was the fact that I didn't know it at the time, but when Jeff was taking theater sports classes from me way back when, he was taking the games that we were teaching at LA Theater Sports, and he was using them while he was in his residency at the VA, working with Vietnam vets suffering from PTSD. And that was fascinating to me and very inspiring. So we began having, it's terrific that we're talking tonight from this particular bookstore, because the idea for our first book was conceived at the Starbucks across the street on Larchmont. But we started talking about how we were using improvisation in other parts of our lives, in other ensembles in our lives, in our personal ensembles, family ensembles, Jeff in his patient ensembles and resident ensembles, and me with students, but also out in the world. I was teaching also corporate improvisation, or improvisation and presentation skills or engagement skills to companies across the world. And in addition to teaching writers and actors and improvisers, I was teaching lawyers and doctors and consultants. So we would have these energetic coffees where we talk about all of the uh, improvisation applications. And this is before there was even such a thing as applied improv, which is now very popular. Um, and we got inspired by the fact that the skills of improvisation are listening, taking care of the other person, serving the story, making positive choices. These are all the skills of being a good human being. And we talked a lot about the fact that these types of skills weren't being taught in skills, and what a wonderful world it would be if they were taught in school. So part of our impetus was to start writing what we were learning as we went along.
And we kind of had an idea, I think independently, that we live in an improvisational manner all the time. We are constantly interacting in spontaneous ways, but no one ever talks to us about how to do that, or what might be the best ways to do that. We're taught an awful lot about trigonometry and calculus or ancient history or all kinds of things that we don't necessarily remember, but the guides of improv people tend to remember, but most people never learn them. But they sure are helpful when we come up upon our meetings with people we're close to and people who are strangers. And we started riffing on this idea and how important it is that the world could start to understand that that we do live in a spontaneous way, but we almost live in a scripted way. Like, this is how we come to know ourselves, is who we think we are. We interact with people in predictable ways, and we become kind of locked in a box that way. And improv almost is a little bit of a key to unlocking that. And so that was really the theme of our first book, is how can you unscript your life?
And one of the fascinating things that Jeff turned me on to, which was very inspiring, was this still face experiment with a mother and child. And we talk about it in the first book, and when we teach, that we as reasoning mammals are hardwired for narrative. We're hardwired for engagement. Briefly, and Jeff, you can punch this up or correct it if I get it wrong.
You're doing awesome.
That in this experiment, which is hard to watch, this mother and baby are facing each other, and as the mother engages, the baby responds and smiles and laughs and is communicating with her mother. And then the researcher asks the mom to turn back around and then come back with a blank face. And you can see the baby starting to, like, hey, we were playing, we were engaging, there was a story, there was a narrative between us. What's happening? And as this goes on longer and longer without the mother responding in any way, the baby begins to really get agitated and upset. And of course, as soon as the mother responds, then the baby is back in the world again. But we like to talk about the fact that every relationship is a story, is a narrative, and how well we engage with each other directly relates to how successful that relationship is. So narrative improvisation is an engagement tool for human beings. The short answer.
Yeah. So improvisation and all of our relationships, when they're going well and when we're riffing and vibing with each other and building something together and collaborating, we're doing exactly what we're hardwired to do, like this mother and infant gazing at each other. And so we are born to collaborate, and we learn not to. We learn that people might not respond to us, or we shouldn't respond to people. And then as grown-ups, we stop playing, and we don't have any places really where we belong, many of us, and natural ways to interact and play with each other, which is, I think, why so many people who are not actors go to Dan's classes. And it's plumbers and lawyers and doctors like me and anybody, not necessarily some people looking to be an actor or a writer or wanting to develop those skills, but a lot of us wanting to belong somewhere and wanting to play.
And we use the stories of particular improv classes as a way of unpacking these skill sets. The At the end of every chapter, there's a list of takeaways that we've talked about in terms of uh, what the application is. And then there are also suggestions of things to try. One of the things Jeff and I talk about in both books is that improvisation is basically mindfulness on your feet. When we're taught in meditation if you start to have thoughts come in, to come back to the breath, come back to the breath, come back to the breath. In real life, and standing and engaging with each other, if I'm drifting away from Jeff in conversation, I want to be intentional and remember, oh, come back to Jeff, come back to Jeff, come back to the moment, rather than feeling shame for drifting away, or thinking about something that's going to happen a week from now. Really trying to be present. One of the things that I'm sure a lot of us have experienced is that feeling of being in a meeting and or being in a group of friends, whatever ensemble is. We should talk about ensemble as a verb, by the way. But whatever ensemble you're in, the idea that when you're, I know this is true for me, it has been true in the past, I really fight against it, which is sometimes I'm just waiting for your mouth to stop moving so I can say the brilliant thing that I've been thinking about while I haven't been listening to you. And that idea really was a big spark for Jeff and I in terms of how do we unpack the idea of being present for each other and supporting each other in an ensemble. You want to talk about how we came to ensemble as a verb?
Yeah. So we started talking about this idea about how people come together, how that mother and infant come together, how we do it as grown-ups, how it happens in groups. And then we came upon this idea of ensembling and wondered what it meant, and saw that it's not actually a word. An ensemble is a noun, but there is no verb to ensemble. So we thought it was kind of cool that we could kind of make it up. So we realized there is a word to assemble, which is what we're all doing now. We're assembling together. But to ensemble for us is something a little bit more, is actually experiencing the way that we're connected to each other as humans, and how we detach, and how we can right the ship and actually get a little more connected. And if we can do that in the world, maybe it's a better place. And we were having this conversation, and then found ourselves unensembled. We found ourselves in March of 2020, quarantined, and so I hadn't until this last weekend. I hadn't seen Dan in a few years, actually, because of what we've all been through. And so, just as we were writing and thinking about how we come together, the world was thrown apart and isolated, and we became very, very interested in that. And we were both feeling kind of lonely and realizing we needed people, and how do we reach them. And we started really looking at loneliness, and what is it, and what does it feel like. And maybe it feels a little like that baby when the mother has a still face and isn't being responded to. And it turns out it's really bad for you. It actually the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It leads to cardiovascular problems, accelerates dementia, inflammatory problems, as well as mental health issues, substance use, and suicide. That there's a lot that's problematic. And when we're talking about loneliness, we're not talking about being on a retreat, or kind of the joy of us introverts of actually being able to curl up with a book and actually reveling in that. We're talking about feeling like we don't belong, or that people don't want to be with us, or that we don't have a purpose and a sense of connection to people close to us, or to a greater community.
And one of the things I read the audio version of our book, and I called Jeff after I finished the last chapter from the sound studio and said, we tell people a lot 3 times in the book to reach out to old friends. And that was one thing we found out that we were both doing during the pandemic, was reaching out to people that we hadn't seen in a while, that we knew might be alone. Whether they were lonely or not, we didn't know. But and we've been hearing stories about people who've done the very same thing during the pandemic, which is connecting with various ensembles that they haven't been connected to in a while. One of the quotes we use in the book, I've done it again, I can't remember the guy's name. Next time I will have it tattooed on my hand. But it's a theologian, David, maybe it'll come to me, but he talks about the feeling of being heard is not unlike the feeling of being loved. And that's an ethic that Jeff and I sort of celebrate and amplify with regards to what it really means to be in an ensemble, and how you grow that ensemble and strengthen it. We also talk about in the book, just so people know, we also talk about sometimes we're in ensembles that are not particularly healthy for us, that are ensembles we should find our way out of. But that sense of connection that does create loneliness is something that we address in the book.
Yeah, and I don't know who on the call here is an improviser and has experience with that, and who does not. But this is certainly not a book where you need to know anything about improvisation, because we're really talking about how we improvise in life. But that we're borrowing ideas from improvisational theater, as well as depth psychotherapy and philosophy, to try to bring these together to understand about the human condition and how we come together. We also do that, for those of you who are improvisers, for some chapters in the first part of the book, through the lens of an improv class. So we know that some people come to a class or are part of an improv group, or maybe your family, who are kind of drivers, and they don't really listen much to other people because they are so awesome, and they have like lots and lots to say, and expect the rest of us to kind of accommodate. And there's kind of a loneliness that's in there, from a lack of understanding other perspectives, and a lack of understanding other people, and people who are more like this, it can be really a light bulb to realize that they're surrounded by actually other humans who have internal worlds and ideas, and that can really be quite a thing for people. And we also talk about the flip of that for those of us who are maybe more attuning to other people, and say like, well, where do you want to go to dinner? I don't know, where do you want to go to dinner? But maybe don't offer up an idea. And that also is problematic in an improv ensemble, because we need ideas, and in order for the story to move forward. And so this is for those of us who are wired that way, a little more to try to figure out, to reach inside and figure out what's going on, and dare to share ourselves. So much of this book is about perspective taking, is about how do we know ourselves a little better? How can we come to understand and wonder about another person, and get curious about them, and wonder what life is like for them, and what would be happening in the world if we could do that.
Do you want me to read the little sort of framing thing we have in the introduction?
Yeah.
Okay, so because this goes to exactly what Jeff and I have been talking about in the last 5 minutes. First, improvisational theater 101. What is it, and why might it be important to think about for all of us interested in forming a stronger sense of belonging? Wait a minute, we hear some of you say. I'm not an actor and I don't want to do theater. Yes, we got you. Theater is, for our purposes, just a space to unpack these things and make them accessible and easily digested. At its most basic level, improvisational theater involves creating something out of nothing, creating characters, relationships, and stories in the moment. It involves working together with a partner or a group to discover a new story. Improvisational theater can involve exercises like we describe in the book. It could be about creating a full-length play inspired by Shakespeare. Fundamentally, it's a group working together toward a common goal, discovering relationships and creating story. Among the ensemble, the players, It involves the development of a sense of trust, respect, community, and compassion. Improvisers follow a set of guidelines in working together as a group. These can be considered by all of us as a sort of anti-loneliness prescription as we apply them to the relationships in our lives. As improvisers follow these ideas and create story, they also work with the processes that inevitably emerge for any group or team in the strengthening of their ensemble. Understanding the group dynamics experienced by an improv group can also help us to positively impact any group in which we find ourselves. Many rules of improvisation are illustrated. The class that we use as an example says yes and to build on each other's ideas. They listen to and are curious about those ideas. Together, they agreed to play and stay present. They focused on the moment and discovered rather than invented what the possibilities were. Basically, they were mindful and listened to each other in a positive way. Throughout the book, we will revisit these ideas in the service of strengthening our relationships, building community, and combating loneliness and isolation. That's kind of a quick sort of page of framing the goal of the book and how we do it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to, Sam put a question in the chat that I think would be helpful to talk about for a second. And Sam says, could you please provide some examples of how one improvs in real life and how honing it in as a skill can improve the situation? Thank you. So I think that would be good to take up a little, just to maybe concretize a little even what we're talking about. And you can pick a scene, pick a market checkout, pick a hallway at work, pick an elevator, pick a stranger on the street. I'll pick a Uber ride where you get in and somebody's driving and there's a question, am I going to interact with this person or not? Or it could be an airplane, but I've had some remarkable Uber rides, actually trying to get to know who is the person driving me and where they're from. But we're not trained to have those kind of spontaneous questions and necessarily get curious about another person. And it is a very enriching moment to actually feel connected as human beings that can go into the workplace, into our families, so that we're operating beyond our predictable, expectable way of being. You can think of your families and what are those expectable phone calls, how we check in with each other, and what would it be like to just go sideways for a second and just think about something else, or wonder what your sister's office looks like and ask for more details. Those would be ways to improvise in real life because they're a little off script. They're not what is necessarily expected for you to get curious in another person.
And anybody who's a parent has had to improvise with their child because talk about spontaneous. Children are very spontaneous. And the story, a lot of time, is whatever they need it to be for them in the moment. There's a question from Josh about, please relist the 4 elements of improvising. Listening, taking care of one another, taking care of the story, whatever's going on between the two people, and making positive choices. It's very easy to be cynical nowadays. And Jeff and I talk about the intentionality of really thinking about putting your attention on the other person. In improvisation, there's lots of rules and guidelines, but one of them is about making your partner look good, and which in this case is taking care of the other person. But making your partner look good, we talk about it in the book. The idea that if I have anxiety, if I'm meeting Jeff and he's my boss or he's my friend, whatever relationship we're in, whatever ensemble we're in, if I put my attention on being of service to him, if I put my attention on making him look good, it, to a certain extent, alleviates the anxiety that I might be feeling in the moment, because I am giving of myself and I'm putting my attention on him. In improvisational terms, if I'm in a scene and I'm worrying about, the audience isn't finding me entertaining or whatever it is, if I just put my focus on the other player, a lot of that just melts away. And now there's a number of pithy improv sayings that we talk about, but one of them is, If you're interested, you're interesting. If I'm on stage in a scene with Jeff and I'm very curious about him, that's going to make me a little bit more interesting a character to watch. Off stage, hopefully everybody's had this experience. I had it recently where somebody was giving me such great attention and being curious that all my initial anxiety about meeting somebody new just melted away, because I was basically being provided a space to be myself and engage. One of the things that we talk about in the book is the fact that when you are generous with your time and your attention to somebody else, what that does for them is basically signals that they can be generous with their time and attention for you. So it is a practice. It's sometimes not necessarily easy to share your attention, but if you want things to be resonant and you want to be seen and you want people to see you, you have to give your attention, be generous with your attention. Curiosity, empathy, compassion, all of these things signal to the other reasoning mammal that they're in a safe space to have a conversation and to engage. Yeah.
We also talk in the book, in both of the books, about really the importance of play and how we and what that feels like and what the spirit of that is, and can you bring it into your workplace or into your relationships with the people you love the most, and can you kind of dare to be playful. And I know personally, I'm not a lifelong improviser. I do it, then I don't do it. I do it and I don't do it as life gets busy or I do other things. When I'm taking an improv class, I'm like a way more playful dude, and people will come into my office and they'll be complaining about something maybe, and I'll say, "You need a drink," and I'll open the bar, and I'll pour them a glass, and we'll have drinks like air drinks, mime drinks in my office, and toast to different people. And suddenly we're playing, and we're not just kind of complaining about something, we're actually connecting with each other. And from there, we'll remember those moments always. So there's a challenge here about how can we play at work? How can we play with the people who are in our lives, rather than get burnt out and fried and tired of situations and people? How can we, if we can tap into play, we can enrich them.
My improv teacher, one of my first improv teachers is Keith Johnstone, and Keith Johnstone talks a lot about adults being atrophied children, that we are playful and filled with story and much more engaging as kids because we don't have the editors that we put up as adults. We don't second guess our choices or have a fear of being silly or what have you. And but if you think about it, play is the way we learn a great many things. One of the things that we've done with applied improvisation is I've been hired to go into a company that is bringing in a consultant. And the consultant doesn't trust the client, and the client doesn't trust the consultant. And we bring improvisation in as a kind of Switzerland offering of a neutral country that can get them to play together first, narrative games to get them to know each other better as human beings and see each other as human beings, and then they go to work together. Because once they stop seeing each other as adversarial, or you're a client, I'm a consultant, or vice versa, once they begin seeing each other as, Rita and Sam, then there's relationship, there's connection, there's a space in which people see each other as human beings.
Yeah, very much the case for my psychiatry faculty. There's 90 of us, and we have a retreat once a year. And the year before COVID, we did improv as kind of a quote icebreaker for half an hour, and then 3.5 hours of work. But because we had done improv first, we only really needed 2 hours to do the work, because we were already so connected and solving things together that people overwhelmingly said, next time, can we do 2 hours of improv or 3 hours of improv and 1 hour of retreat? Because people, are scared of it a little and intimidated by the word. And but when they realize it really is just playing with each other, that it actually was kind of mind blowing to people on our faculty.
And we go into, organizations years later after being there, and they're still using the lexicon of improvisation, um, because it makes sense and it's resonant. Um, did you talk about perspective taking? I don't know if I asked you about.
I think we kind of, I think
Okay.
we have a little bit. So this is the idea that we were talking about, and we'll play a game to really show how improv can
Yeah.
accelerate this. But really, the idea of like, can I know what's going on with me, and can I know what's going, and get interested and curious about what's going on in you, and flip back and forth. And can I deepen the process of knowing me and deepen the process of knowing you? And can you know that I know you? And what does that feel like? So this is about walking in another person's shoes and perspective taking, and really, some people are so good at this. It always blows me away when I see somebody that's naturally seems so good at this. So there's various ways that improv can instruct in this, and Dan and I can play a little game for you here to.
Yeah, we're gonna play a little game that is partially a Keith Johnstone game, but also developed by Joe McGinley, who's in Improv Theater, which is the theater company that I belong to, that's in Los Feliz. For those of you who are in LA, Improv Theater improvises full-length improvised plays in the style of Shakespeare and Jane Austen and film noir. Um, so Jeff and I are going to play the interview game, which I think Joe McGinley invented. And what the game is that he's going to play me in a movie, and we're going to switch the pronouns. So he's going to ask me, what was I like? And I'm going to answer him, even though I'm talking about myself, you were like this. And so this is a very simple game. We play a lot, especially when an ensemble is first meeting together.
Yeah, and so I really want this information because I'm gonna play Dan, and I want a major $1 million contract or something to play Dan in this movie. So I gotta get this information. So there's a certain urgency for me to get the information. So Dan, tell me a little bit what I was like when I was 8.
When you were 8, Jeff, you were really precocious. You were a towhead. You put on shows for all of your relatives. You were told a lot about. Yeah, you were told a lot. You were adorable.
And did I put on these shows by myself, or did I do it with other people?
No, you put on shows with your brother, who was 2 years younger than you, and you would have your grand aunts and uncles, all of whom seemed ancient to your 8-year-old brain, but you would put on a show for them while your mom gave them a cup of tea or coffee or a highball, and you would do full on weird shows that you actually improvised.
Nice. And did I have a best friend when I was 8?
When you were 8, what grade are you when you're 8?
So maybe like third-ish.
Third-ish.
Third grade, second grade, third
No,
grade.
third grade. You really didn't have a best friend because you'd gone to a new school. Anyway.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's the game. It's just called Interview. And one of the things that happens, one of the feedback things that happens, like, first off, Jeff was asking me about stuff that I have not thought about since I was 8. Also, because I was using the different pronoun, there's a certain amount of openness that maybe if I was talking about me or I, that I wouldn't have.
Yeah. And then what did it feel like for me to be curious about that?
It's great because I mean, I love that because I literally have not thought about the fact that I didn't have a best friend in third grade because I was the new kid.
Yeah. And then Dan and I know each other pretty well. We've spent a lot of time together, but I don't know any of that. So there's just so much that we can actually know about people we think we know, just by getting curious. Do we want to open for questions here?
Teresa, yeah, do you want to see if there's any questions out there?
All right, for sure. Everyone, we're gonna move on to the Q&A. So if you've got questions for Dan or Jeff, make sure to type them into the chat box. If you'd like, you could also just raise your hand in the Zoom function and you can unmute yourself and ask the question directly. I'm going to start off with my own question. I took some notes during your presentation. I have play in all caps with 3 exclamation points at the end, which I think that was such a great point that you made, especially working in a retail situation where you see, dozens of people a day and it's like you're on one side of the register and someone else is on the other side. I think when you introduce that element of, I'm not just here to tell you what the price of your book is, it's makes the day pass by so much faster.
Yeah.
So my question for you is, what are the tips that you give adults to step into that mindset when, you mentioned there's a consultant and a client and you try to get them to do improv. I'm sure that first minute setting it up is the hardest. So how do you sort of get them into the jive of it?
We basically say we're going to warm them up, and that these are very simple things, and we're a little surreptitious in that, because we're not front loading it as these are soft skills you must learn. We're basically saying we're just going to warm up the room a little bit and let everyone get to know each other. And what happens over time is, as soon as, and I've literally had people, Teresa, walk up and say to me, "I'm not creative," before one of these sessions. People, and that's part of our first book was about unscripting from that notion of what maybe people have painted on you that's not true. I was working with a group of lawyers who were on basically a golf trip, but they needed to write it off, so they needed to have a class. And this person said, "I'm not creative," beforehand. And within 5-6 minutes, as soon as people started to play together, the room changed into, there was laughter. People were laughing at, engaging with each other. Just like Jeff said, people who've known each other for years don't connect in that way at work. They may not connect in that way. I shouldn't say they don't ever. But one of the exercises we used to do, which is not in the book, but we've done before, which is the story of your name. We just go around and ask everybody to tell, how were you named? Who were you named after? And people who have been working with each other together for years, the looks on their faces, because they're seeing them as a human being. So it's a great question, and because some people are worried that we're going to ask them to be a tree, or that we're going to ask them to do acting exercises. And we sort of frame it in a way that, no, this is just about, conversation and engagement. It's not about performance. It's not about acting. And introduce them basically to just engaging with each other. And it's kind of awe-inspiring. It's one of the reasons why I still do this work, and why we still do this work after so many years, is you can see cultures being changed. You can see people relating to each other differently. I just got finished teaching 6 months of engineers for Cisco, and they're very introverted. No, I shouldn't say they're all, but some people are introverted. They're very nice. But one of the games we taught them, when I worked with them a month later, this guy had been playing it with his family. So he had taken this playful thing as a way to engaging with his kids and with his partner.
And I to be really honest, I love level 1 improv classes. I don't really like level 2, 3, and 4 as much as I love level 1, because you really learn to do exactly what you're talking about too, like to do these group exercises, and these and to come together as a group and mess around a little bit. And a famous one that's people do, we can't really do online so well as some other improv games, are is called zip, where everyone in a circle has maybe, well, there's various versions, will go zip and point to somebody, and then somebody has to catch it, and then they go, and it goes around and around and around. And I remember doing that with our leadership team at the hospital. And then the next day I was working in the emergency room, and one of the nurses came up to me and she said, zip, like that, right in the emergency room. And it was as though we had a new playfulness between us, really. And we were cracking up, and we never would have interacted that way.
And the retail thing, Teresa, I think in fact, I've played this game, and I bet Jeff has too, which is, if I see somebody in retail, if I'm in a coffee shop or a store, and I see someone obviously having a bad day on that side of the counter, I will go, hey, how's it going? I just, one of the things we talk about in the book is that engagement is one of the most important things, one of the most important attributes for longevity. In blue zones around the world where people are living to 100, what have you, one of the things that is part of the research is having a sense of purpose and being engaged with each other. And when I found that out, I live in Northeast LA and go for walks all the time. I began saying hello to everybody on the street. And the difference because people, and not all the time, and I got busted for generalities at an event we did last week. So I don't want to be general, but sometimes you can see somebody on the street who's got their urban mask on. They're I don't want to talk to you, whatever. And when you say hello or hey, good morning, or whatever it is, you can see the mask literally break off and a smile come up. And because we assume that people aren't going to, some people assume we aren't going to engage. And so Jeff and I are big advocates for, in fact, we talked about in the beginning of Ensemble, that airport thing, which I think Jeff started to talk about, how we can be in an airport food court where there's 300 people and everybody is on their phone or everybody is isolated. There's not a lot of sense of, and not everybody, but most people are not engaging with each other. And yet when we sit down in the seat on the plane, there may be that moment where you help somebody with their bag or something like that, and suddenly you're in a conversation for 3 hours on a plane with someone that you don't know, probably will never see again, and probably, I would say, are maybe a little bit more open because of that. So it's interesting how we engage. And I think one of the things we're talking about in the book is to be purposeful about that engagement, be intentional. Yeah.
One other thing you're reminding me of is in the book, we have a whole section around Zoom and Zoom fatigue. We were talking about that a little bit. And I told you that some days I'm at like 14 straight hours Zooming. And what I have really found is it's really not fair to people to just have a meeting that goes for an hour. You've got to play. You got to figure out some way to play because the meeting goes so much better. So there are a lot of things you can do on Zoom to kind of facilitate the play and engagement we're talking about. One is like to give a gift so that like you can say, like I would say to you, Teresa, like I am giving you my air conditioning monitor here because I heard it's hot in Los Angeles. And so I want you to have it so that you can keep yourself cool. And then you would give a gift to somebody else. But there are various ways that you can kind of traverse Zoom cells to build a sense of play and connection. And that's just another example of we can all be spontaneous and do what we're not planning.
I love that. That was actually one of my questions on my list was, do you have any tips for ensembling on Zoom? That was one. And definitely, I was wondering also if you have any more tips, even for instance, when you're on a phone meeting where you don't even have any sort of visual cue of the other person, how do you ensemble even in that way?
I think active listening and leaving space for folks. and Jeff actually talked about this at the event we did last week, where the a lot sometimes we tend to listen to each other. So Teresa, you're telling me about having coffee on Larchmont, and then my response is to go, I've had coffee on Larchmont, as opposed to tell me about your coffee. You know, you be like we talked about of making your partner look good, asking questions about your coffee and your experience, because a lot of our interactions tend to be, oh, I do that too, and then we never get to your coffee because we've moved on to my coffee. So actively being curious and really being intentional about it. I know with my wife, if one of us has had a long day and we're distracted or something like that, if I'm that person, I know that I need to consciously be present for her and really try and not pick up my phone or drift away, but to unpack or ask more questions or dig into the details of whatever she's saying. Sometimes that can manifest itself in me just listening, but there's a difference between listening and really listening. You know, I think sometimes we pay lip service to that. So what is authentic listening, and how does that feel? How does that manifest? Yeah.
I was also wondering if, you know, you mentioned this before, that there are plenty of people who take your improv class, you know, who aren't actors or writers or anything like that. Do you have a particular example of a particular student who's maybe taken that improv class and improved some other part of their life?
Yes. Yes. There's a contractor who has been taking classes from us for 11 or 12 years, and it's his bridge club, bowling league, book club, all rolled into one. And not only, I think what he gets from it is joy to go and laugh and make up stories, but also he's now more engaged with people he's working with, and he's happier. We've had, in fact, we quote this student in the first book. We had a student who came to us who had issues with depression, and I believe being bipolar, and felt very much alone, and but through doing improvisation and practicing and coming to class every week, she gained a sense of confidence and reached out to us to basically go, hey, this is working for me. I am now no longer taking these meds. I am much more confident moving through the world because I have a sense of community. I have a sense of confidence. So I wouldn't want to say that taking an improv class is a panacea to the world's ills, but I would say that if everybody behaved as an improviser with regards to making your partner look good, making positive choices, it's our contention that the world would be a much more friendly, engaged place.
I've also had the experience of working with the Ellen Alda Center for Communicating Science in Stony Brook, and they teach improvisational theater skills to PhD scientists who go there and play. And it's kind of radical to watch because these are not necessarily the most playful of people naturally. It's not what they do, and so it's a lot for them to be playing some of the games we're talking about and be physical. But the whole idea is really for them to be able to loosen up so they can actually communicate their science, because it's really like the last step of the scientific method is to communicate your work, and so they are learning about how to tell a story and how to be spontaneous and how to connect with people as a storyteller while they're talking about their science. So I've seen remarkable things in terms of people who I couldn't even follow what they were talking about turn something into a message that was profound, where I could really get this kind of the importance of their science.
And
I
and
love
good
that.
good story creates oxytocin in the brain. It makes you feel good, and it also, like Jeff just Jeff's example, good story means that it's going to be more sticky and more memorable for you.
For sure. Okay, so we've got time for maybe one or two more questions. If you have one burning deep inside you, please make sure to type it right now. Otherwise, the last question is going to be another one of mine, which is, doing this job, I get the chance to talk to a lot of authors. And they often tell me, or, they often say that writing or creating a book is often a lonely process. But obviously, you both have an ensemble in writing books. This is your second one together. Could you tell us a little bit about the process of writing a book with a partner? What are the pros? What are the cons? What are the moments when you're most frustrated with each other? Or is it just smooth sailing the whole way?
Maybe I frustrated Jeff in the past. I might be guilty of that, but I think I think like during COVID, we would get very excited. I would text him about something that resonated with regards to our book, because there was so much out there about loneliness. I mean, in the UK, they have a minister for loneliness. That's how important they view it. And so our process of just talking, we wrote the whole book separate. I mean, we wrote the whole book in separate zip codes, but together, talking over the phone. And sometimes one of us would go off and write a whole bunch, and then the other one would comment on it. But it was very much a yes and improvisational experience, and I think we inspire each other a great deal. So we're lucky because we're coming at it from kind of two different points of view, and yet there's so much in the middle that's exciting to both of us.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, I feel really fortunate to have known Dan and gotten to write with you, and it's been a kind of joyous process for me. I would say for me personally, being a psychiatrist, I mean, I have very close family and friends, but in general, it can be a kind of lonely profession because you're seeing people and you're not sharing of yourself. You're attuned and you're listening, but it's not two-way street, and you're certainly not able to connect with them outside of the consulting room. So friendships are so valuable to someone who's in that profession. So for me, it was kind of a break from kind of the unilateral HIPAA protected patient client relationships to a different kind of collaboration. And so it's been a rewarding experience for me. And I echo what Dan says about being able to be with somebody who's coming from a different perspective and a different world. And I'd also say we're not experts at this at all. So we have a test at the end to see how good you are at ensembling. I think it's 25 questions. We kind of made it tongue in cheek. I think we scored a 10, each of us. So we passed, but there's room for improvement. And in that way, I'm kind of saying that because we were kind of building the bridge as we were walking across it, in quarantine, isolated, trying to figure out what is this experience, what is happening to us, what is the process, how does this have to do with psychology and improv, and how do you get unlonely, and what's important about that. So thank you. That's a great question, Teresa.
Yeah. Oh my God, I'm gonna have to take that quiz tomorrow when I get into the store. All right. So an enormous thank you to both of our speakers tonight, Dr. Jeff Katzman and Dan O'Connor. I want to thank you both for sharing your time and your expertise and some laughter with us. Before we log off, I'm going to tell everyone one more time that you can get your copy of Ensemble online at the link provided in the chat box to support Shivali's books and make sure that more nights like these keep happening. And yeah, that's it. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Dan. Any last words before we say our final goodbye?
No,
if people are interested in, and since we are in LA, if people are interested, improtheater.com, I can put it in the chat. But that's where classes and our shows are if people are interested in that. And thanks so much for having us. Sorry, Jeff, I interrupted you.
No. I was just going to say something more mundane and thank everyone for being here. Yeah, thank you.
For sure. Well, thank you again, everyone, for being here. Have the rest of, what is it, Wednesday? Have a great Wednesday evening, everyone. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.